Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm the Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. During the COVID-19 public health emergency, all First Church in-person activities have moved online or they've been rescheduled. We're now offering all ages religious education every Sunday at 10 a.m. and youth group at 1 p.m. online. You can find the link to join in your RE weekly updates. Please sign up for that update to find out more about religious education for children and family ministry, including ways to connect with our families, our faith, and our community every week. Join us for a virtual coffee hour this morning after services at 10 a.m. or 12 p.m. We'll chat in small groups on video conference. You can find the Zoom meeting link in the live stream chat and in your Friday emails. You'll need to enter a password, which is UUMKE, all lowercase. Once you enter the Zoom meeting, Membership Development Coordinator Lynn Jacoby will coordinate groups of 5 or 6 for small group conversations. Members, visitors, and friends are all welcome, but you have to bring your own coffee. Our Interchange food pantry needs help. Due to the pandemic, Interchange can't get their usual food from Feeding America, and they're quickly running through their budget. Please consider giving them a donation if you can. First Church helped found Interchange, and it's one of the only food pantries that's serving all of Milwaukee County. Their brave volunteers are doing an amazing job of keeping the pantry open in these difficult times when several local pantries have already closed. Interchange hopes to be able to keep supplying healthy food to all who come, half of whom are children. You can find the link to donate to the GoFundMe in the comments of the live stream, as well as on our First Church Facebook. Due to the coronavirus outbreak, our guest house meal that was scheduled for April 18th will not happen as planned. Instead, the guest house staff is asking you to consider making a donation on their website or by sending in a check. They're also in need of non-perishable and frozen meals. If you'd like to drop off food, please coordinate your delivery with Sienna, who also wants us to share with you Guest House's gratitude for your continuing support. You can find the link to donate in the chat comments. I'll be holding a space for connection and reflection this Thursday at 6 p.m. from 6 to 7 on Zoom. You can find the link in your e-announcement and on First Church's Facebook page. I'll also be holding a lunch with the senior minister on Facebook Live on Monday between 12 and 12:30 p.m. on our First Church Facebook group. Please be sure to join that Facebook group where we'll keep sharing announcements and videos and ways to connect. By the way, we are still accepting summer service proposals and applications to be a worship associate. Both of these are powerful opportunities to share stories and compelling messages to nourish our community's spirits, engage our minds, and inspire us to action. You can find the links to apply in your e-news and on our website. As we continue to learn how to do church together in this new time of coronavirus, We thank you in advance for your patience and your graciousness as we learn how to build this ship as we sail it. Today, in our second worship service that's being live streamed from home, we'll be moving back and forth between live worship leaders like me right now and some pre-recorded elements that provide touchstone from our sanctuary. Once again, I'd like to welcome you to our online worship service by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words this morning are from the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 35 through 38. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was a prisoner, and you visited me. And then the people would say, when, Jesus, when did I do this? And Jesus replied, truly, I tell you, just as you did this for one of the least of these who are members of my family, so too you did this for me. Now let's watch me light our flaming chalice, a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, and reconnect with our beloved sanctuary.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Tomchek Carlson, and I am the Director of Religious Education at First Church. The story I have for you today is by Andy McGuire, and it's called Remy the Rhino Learns Patience. He had taken a few deep breaths and had counted to 10, but Remy the Rhino was charging again. The zebras this time were about to get hurt because they'd eaten the grass he'd saved for dessert. It seems there was someone constantly to charge because that's what you do when you're angry and large. His doctor would say he had issues with rage. Well, his daddy just told him, please act your age. Everything always made Remy upset. The dust was too dry, the water too wet. He hated the hot, he hated the cold. He wouldn't put up with the young or the old. The meerkats were jumpy, the hyenas too loud. Giraffes made him grumpy and lions too proud. Gazelles were too timid, baboons made him scowl. They'd better stop bothering Remy right now. Then one evening, he dropped off for a snooze on the ground when an aardvark came tumbling and shuffling around. Hungry for insects, she searched with her nose until she tripped on a patch of rhinoceros toes. Well, Remy got mad, as you probably guessed, but the aardvark did something I wouldn't suggest. She stood there and she waited for Remy to charge her. She stood there and she watched him get closer and larger. At the very last moment, as quick as can be, she dodged, and Remy ran into a tree. He stepped back, but his horn had got caught, and the more Remy struggled, the stucker it got. He groaned and he steamed, he moaned and he grunted, but that old tree would not do what he wanted. He screamed like a banshee. He stomped on the ground. It sounded like thunder for miles around. Hundreds of animals fled in confusion. But then the aardvark said softly, I have a solution. Remy calmed down for a moment or two. So the aardvark went on saying, I know just what to do. What you need is some creatures to chew on this tree. I've got some connections. Just leave it to me. The aardvark left Remy alone to consider what kind of animals nibbled trees for their dinner. Remy was growing a little afraid when the aardvark came back with a termite parade. My termites are perfect for this kind of work, but there's one thing you must keep in mind. Whenever you angrily struggle or jerk, it scares off the termites and slows down their work. So Remy experienced a strange new sensation. He took a crash course in the virtue of patience. He waited through rain. He waited through thunder. He waited through birds crawling over and under. He waited through leopards' absurd decorations. He waited through gawkers from faraway nations. He waded through elephant balancing acts, until little by little by little, he learned to relax, and the termites freed him. The end. Thank you for listening to our story today. Reverend Jennifer will now lead you in a guided meditation.
Thank you so much for that story, Kimberly. So go ahead, First Church folks, and as we enter into this time of meditation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the singing of Spirit of Life, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe that means feeling your feet on the floor, grounding you, or maybe it means feeling your spine sturdy and strong, holding you up. Maybe it means feeling the very top of your head, connecting you to all that is. Maybe it means feeling your breath moving in and out of your body and bringing you into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Be with each of us in our separate houses, breathing and being, and yet also connect us with one another, with the broader community and the city around us. Help us feel one another, breathing the same air, living under the same sky. Let us feel connected with the whole of this place, this people, this city, this country, this world. May we remember all the parts of the whole, the joy and the suffering, the hungry and the fed, the sick and the well. May we be part of the whole and help in making the body well, knowing we are waves from the same sea, leaves from the same tree, flowers from the same garden. May it be so. Now let's return to our beloved sanctuary, where the singing bowl will frame our shared silence, and then sing Spirit of Life. in February of this year, as China was struggling with the coronavirus and overburdened hospitals and a lack of face masks for healthcare workers. A group of young people from the Japanese Youth Development Association decided to try to help. Despite the long history of tension between China and Japan, and despite the reality that Japan might be facing similar coronavirus struggles soon. The group of young people gathered desperately needed thermometers and face masks and mailed them to China. On the side of the boxes of the medical equipment, the Japanese young people wrote a line from a famous Chinese poem. It read, "Even though we live in different places, we live under the same sky." After the Japanese Youth Development Association sent those desperately needed medical supplies to China, along with that poem, the line from the poem went viral on Chinese Twitter. About 40,000 people shared the sentiment, including the Deputy Director General of the Chinese Foreign Ministry Department and the Japanese Prime Minister. Even though we live in different places, we live under the same sky. In her book, On the Mystery, theologian Catherine Keller argues that health cannot take place for one part of the body while the rest is ill. This is Keller's understanding of what justice means, that justice takes place in our world through the truth of inseparability. We might make choices to harm one another based on a delusion of separateness, but even though the arc of it may be wrong, justice will ultimately prevail, because reality is that we're stuck together in what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King called the inescapable fabric of mutuality. We are learning about the truth of this inseparability right now. On March 31st, Anna Flagg and Joseph Neff wrote in the New York Times, quote, "Picture thousands of cruise ships jammed with guests, but short on hand sanitizer, protective gear, and medical care. Every week, a quarter of the passengers get off, and they're replaced with new people who have the potential to either infect or be infected by coronavirus. There's a place like this in your community. It's called the county jail. It's captained by your local sheriff, who is charged with preventing COVID-19 outbreaks, but most likely has limited supplies and usually no say in who enters and leaves the jail." End of quote. Importantly, in this metaphor, the passengers have absolutely no say of whether they enter or exit the jail. In a given week, nationally, about 200,000 people move in and out of jail. This means that every week, the equivalent of about a third of the city of Milwaukee is moving in and out of a not socially distanced, low hygiene breeding ground for coronavirus. Indeed, according to that New York Times article, on March 30th, New York's Legal Aid Society reported that 36 out of 1,000 inmates in New York City jails tested positive for coronavirus. And that compares to 4 out of 1,000 people in the city at large. That's just 9 times as many who are infected in New York City's jails as in New York City. And that's when New York is being called the #1 hotspot for COVID-19 in our entire country. At this point, being arrested is potentially a life and death threat. According to prison policy, 74% of people who are held in jails have not been convicted of a crime. Nationally, that's 555,000 people. Even worse in terms of justice, studies have found that Black people are somewhere between 2 and 10 times as likely to be arrested as white people are for misdemeanors. And undocumented people are still being sent to and held in detention centers for things like driving without a license or being undocumented. Immigration and customs enforcement is using this time of safer at home and shelter in place to catch undocumented people in their homes. Surely, those of us who care about justice don't think that misdemeanors or driving without a license or just being undocumented or Black should mean that a person should be exposed to coronavirus. This is one of the places we are learning how sticky justice works, how the health of the whole body is fundamentally tied to the health of all of its parts. We are stuck together, and coronavirus is showing us that injustice and illness in our jails means illness for us all. The title of that New York Times article is "Why Jails Are So Important in the Fight Against Coronavirus." Coronavirus is being concentrated and exponentially spread through jails and then back out into the world. 200,000 people going in and out of jails every week, including people who are arrested, but also people who work there, healthcare providers, vendors, visitors, chaplains. We are all connected. There is no us and them. A problem for people inside the jail is a problem for people outside the jail. Coronavirus is showing us how sticky justice works. Our opening words today were from the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 35 through 38. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. And when the people asked Jesus, "When did I do this?" he replied, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, so you did it to me." Everyone is a member of the human family. Every single person. And it is through the least of these, the people who are marginalized in our society, who have been pushed to the sides or literally caged, that our society's health will rise or fall. The whole society is interwoven with the 500,000 unconvicted people who are in jail right now. It is interwoven with the 44 million Americans who are uninsured, 8 out of 10 of whom are workers and who are probably still working. It is interwoven with the majority of blue-collar workers who must go out into the world to do their jobs, whether that's working at the grocery store or delivering food or products or providing transportation or healthcare. We are connected. We are inextricably linked. Here in Milwaukee, the virus has been spreading fast in the African American community. In the first 2 weeks of reporting confirmed cases in Milwaukee, more than half of the people suffering from the disease were Black people. This makes sense in the context that white folks are almost twice as likely to be able to work from home as Black or Hispanic workers. But still, our fates are tied together. While the pandemic is hitting marginalized people faster, there's no containing it. The health of the whole, the health of the city, depends on the health of everyone in it, and it particularly depends on the health of those who are marginalized. Our universalist theological tradition comes out of wrestling with the question of what's called soteriology, or the question of what will save us. In the 1700s, when the predominant theologies in the United States said that only Christian faith could save people and all other people were damned, our universalist ancestors said no. All people are saved. All people will be saved. Universalists argued that an all-loving, all-powerful, all-merciful God would not damn finite human beings to eternal hell. They argued that finite human wrong was no match for the infinite love and mercy of God. A humanist frame for this universalist theology would be our Unitarian Universalist first principle. What saves us is the inherent worth and dignity of every single human being. The word salvation comes from the root word salvus, which means health and well-being and wholeness. And as Catherine Keller said, that cannot take place for one part of the body while other parts of the body are ill. Keller said that in understanding we are all parts of the whole, we understand that we are either all saved together or not at all. She wrote, "Salvation is a sticky process, and we are stuck together in our creaturely condition." The ultimate meaning of our lives is inseparable from the rest of humanity. This idea pushes our first principle towards our seventh principle, the interdependent web of all existence. Rather than thinking of our Unitarian Universalist first principle as the equality and justice within humanity principle, and the seventh principle as being about the environment and the earth, sticky justice asks us to de-individualize our first principle. Yes, we are all inherently worthy, but we're not separate from one another in that way. It's not about you doing your worthy thing somewhere over there and me doing my worthy thing over here. No. Sticky justice says that our worth is tied to one another. Our well-being, our sickness, and our health is bound up in one another and interdependent. Salvation comes through the health and the well-being of all, the beauty and the harmony of the whole, and all of its parts. Shantideva, a Buddhist teacher from the 8th century in India, wrote in the introduction to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and other beings should interchange the terms of I and other, and thus embrace a sacred mystery. In process theology, like Catherine Keller's, salvation is not predetermined or individual. It is collective and collaborative. We human beings participate in it, and in so doing, we create what saves us. We choose to create heaven or hell here and now. Keller argues that heaven, the kingdom of all people, all beloved beings, co-creating beauty and harmony, quote, unfolds not amidst the predictable, but at the edge of chaos, where what had not been possible becomes possible. She says that the hoped for collaborative harmony becomes possible through us prioritizing love, prioritizing the well-being of the least of these, and loving one another and the whole and each of the whole's parts as we love ourselves. To bring those beautiful possibilities into being, those ones that are hovering at the horizon of chaos, to bring them into being rather than the horrifying ones, which are also there hovering at the horizon. Human beings' work is to shape change with generosity and compassion and minimize harm. This is our work now. Quoted in Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy, the organizer Gopal Dayani reminds us that chaos is built into the system in which we live. And even though chaos causes harm, as the loving and compassionate people we are, who are committed to our collective, collaborative survival, we can learn how to, quote, harness the shocks and direct the slides that characterize the instability of our times, and to harness them to achieve the systemic, cultural, and psychic shifts we need to navigate the change with greatest equity, resilience, and ecological restoration possible. Harness the changes and direct the slides. The system in which we live has been shocked, and there will be slides. As love workers, as people of compassion and people of vision, now is the time to remember our shared humanity, the time to tell stories about it, in order to direct our future towards living in ways that honor that shared humanity, that honor the least of these, that recognize our fundamental interdependence and celebrate the well-being and the health of all of the parts of the body. Each of us has purpose now. Each of us can contribute to retelling and redirecting that story and our attention and our resources to the shared health and well-being of the whole. In Atlanta last week, people sheltering in place in skyscrapers around the downtown hospital erupted in cheers for healthcare workers going into work during shift change. Doctors and nurses and janitors and clerks were applauded for their sacrifice and their frontline work, their courageous frontline work against the coronavirus. And they should be cheered and honored for that work all the time. Our grocery store workers and garbage collectors and transportation drivers are all on the front lines too. Jobs that we can see are essential and for which we are so grateful. And we should be grateful for them all the time. Due to pressure from activists and health officials, the Los Angeles County Jail, the largest jail in the United States, has released 3,000 people since coronavirus struck. It's time now to release from jail more people who can be safely released and protect vulnerable populations and all of us from the concentrated spread of coronavirus. You can help heal the whole body and keep the body well by calling your governor and asking them to support the Reform Alliance's safer plan for incarcerated people. Doing these things, practicing gratitude, celebrating all of the parts of the body, and protecting the health of the whole won't stop what's coming, but it can keep us human through it. And it may even help us be a little more human after. Help us remember our interwoven, sticky humanity. In her article, "The Pandemic is a Portal," in the Financial Times, quoted by the NAP ministry, one of my favorite ministries, author Arundhati Roy wrote, "Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and our dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it." In mid-March, as other European Union nations were refusing to send masks and ventilators to Italy, choosing instead to stockpile them in case their countries were hit by the virus, a team of 9 Chinese medical staff arrived in Italy with 30 tons of medical equipment on a flight organized by the Red Cross Society of China. The supplies sent to Italy from China had a quote from the Roman philosopher Seneca pasted on the side of the boxes. "We are waves from the same sea, leaves from the same tree, flowers of the same garden." May this time of the coronavirus help us see our mutual and inextricably interwoven humanity. May we choose to use our understanding of sticky justice to work for the health of the whole body right now. And may we walk through the pandemic's portal lightly, carrying love with us through the door of possibility. May it be so.